Welcome back to Waking Mad. I'm Ben Bruce and I'm at the Afterlife Explorers Conference in Melbourne, Australia in 2016. And it is with great privilege to interview our guest Molly Carlile, who was presenting at the conference on the first day, I believe, Saturday.
Yeah.
And Molly Carlile really captured my interest. I went to her seminar and she was talking about death and dying. It's a rather sobering subject. It's one that many people, especially in the West, have great difficulty discussing. Welcome, Molly.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Thank you, thank you. Now, I hear that you are called the Death Talker.
That's exactly right.
And that sounds rather ominous, I don't know, but why are you called the Death Talker?
Because, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, really. I talk about death.
There you go.
That's what I do.
There you go. There you go. And so what does that mean? I mean...
Okay, so my professional background, I guess, is that, I've spent years working in a clinical environment in mainstream health with dying and grieving people. I've also worked in the community. I've worked as a specialist palliative care nurse, as a counsellor, as a teacher, as an academic, all sorts of stuff.
If I can just pause here, because I want to go through Molly's brief CV if I can, because it's actually astounding. Molly is a registered nurse. She is a counsellor specialising in grief and bereavement. She's a specialist in palliative care. She has a Masters of Education. She's a company director. She also has the Order of Australia Award. She's a member of the Order of Australia, awarded by the Queen. You're a very qualified person.
Well, I love learning. That's the thing. And I was very lucky to discover my passion in working with dying and grieving people very early in my career. And every time I got to a point where someone would ask me something, or a person would have a fear or apprehension about something that I couldn't answer and that I didn't know where to source the support from, that was what flagged to me that I needed to go and learn some more stuff. So, for instance, in the very early days, I was looking after a young mum who was dying of liver cancer, and I was 19 or 20 myself,
Wow.
I was a kid.
And this as a nurse?
Yeah. And she said to me, how am I going to make sure that my kids remember me, not in a month or 2 months, but in 20 years? And I was a kid myself. And I said, I don't know, but how about I go away and I see what I can find out for you. And really that set me on a path of lifelong learning that still hasn't stopped. That's why I'm here. I'm not just here to present a keynote address. I'm here to learn from other people who are doing all sorts of interesting stuff that just hasn't crossed my radar in the past. Some of it's sort of been out there on the periphery, but I've made myself go to sessions that normally I would go, likely. I've really tried to challenge myself this weekend and go and listen to people that normally I would not go and listen to.
Yeah. Many presenters here are quite far afield, quite far out there.
Yeah.
Left of centre, outlier, etc.
And that's why I said at the very start of my presentation yesterday, it is so unusual for me to be the conservative presenter. I'm usually the one who's way out there, and everyone's going, oh my God, what's she going to say?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
palliative care is, from my point of view, mainstream, but obviously the way that you're presenting is not quite mainstream.
So, okay, I started, I guess my day job has predominantly been in mainstream palliative care. You're right. However, as time has gone by, I've very clearly understood that death has become so medicalised and so institutionalised,
Right.
and people who are living their own dying experience and the people who they love that sit around them often have the control of that experience removed from them because other people think they know better. And having worked in a system where there's a lot of people who think they know better, I began to question that and say, hang on a minute, just because you've got a medical degree or a nursing degree or you're a social worker or whatever you are, how come all of a sudden we think we're the experts in someone else's life experience? Because I don't know this person. Until I sit down and listen to their story, I haven't got a clue about them. I know what their diagnosis is. I probably know what their prognosis is. I know what their current treatment is in terms of physical pain and symptom management. But what do I know about them as an emotional being, as a psychological person, as a spiritual being, as a social being, as a member of their family, as a member of their wider community? And when I started to ask those questions, all of a sudden I realised, you know, in mainstream health, here we are telling everyone we're providing person-centred care, when really we're not. We're imposing the care we think a person should have. We're not asking them what's important to you. Because if we did ask people that, a lot of people would say, I don't want to have any more chemo, I want to go home. Or I don't want to have any more dialysis, which means I've got to drive 4 hours, you know, twice or 3 times a week, and then 4 hours home. I want to stay at home, I want to stop the dialysis.
So we're good in the mainstream medical care situation at helping treat symptoms, try to treat diseases, extend life, but are we good with dealing with dying in the process itself and death itself?
I don't think we are. I don't think we're... Look, we're probably good in terms of specialist palliative care in looking after people who have complicated dying.
Okay.
Right? But for those people who don't have that, which is the majority, I don't think we're very good at informing people about what death looks like and what the dying process looks like, in empowering people to think of death as a normal culmination of a human existence, because the community out there all think that they're immortal. They don't want to think about their death because that only happens when you're really old. But that's not the case. And you know what? A whole lot of people who we think are really old, when you ask them about how old they feel, they will tell you, I look in the mirror and I see someone I don't know. Because in here, I feel like I'm still 22. But in there, I'm this wrinkly old lady with white hair, you know. So it's all relative. And yet, even in aged care, people go into an aged care facility the day they're admitted, and they know that the only way they are going to leave is in a box. They know that. Because the reason they're moving into an aged care facility is because they can't look after themselves at home anymore. So they need someone else, you know, a team to look after them. And yet, even in that environment, aged care staff are really reluctant to have conversations with residents about what their wishes are in terms of their death. So nobody says to them, like, what does a good death look like to you? Tell me what that might look like. Tell me who'd be there. Tell me, would it happen here in the facility? Or would a good death to you be us ringing an ambulance, taking you to the hospital? And
so
what
it's
if
a great question. What does a good death look like to you?
Yeah,
not,
to
not,
you.
Not look like to you.
Yeah, to you. It has to be.
I think a lot of people freak out when you think about it. They go, oh, euthanasia, oh, suicide, or, you know, what have you.
Yeah.
And there's probably lots of religious stuff behind that. But really, it's my death.
Absolutely.
And I'm disenfranchised from it.
Yeah,
I don't have the privilege, the discursive privilege to even talk about it.
I know.
I'm supposed to just have ad nauseum treatment in the hands of others and just be passive. That can't be right.
No, it's not right. And not only that, half the reason that happens is because the people who are giving you that treatment are just as scared themselves, because they see you as a failure of contemporary medicine. So
their own failure, isn't it?
Yes, and then they take that on board. Oh my God, I've got a client I can't fix. Let's do one more MRI. Let's do one more this. I've got to fix
one more
this.
round of chemo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to be Dr. Freud here, but I'm thinking that there might be some projection from the practitioner around their own death anxiety onto the patient, which is why they can't accept. I was talking to an emergency physician the other day, a very experienced emergency doctor, and he was talking about how he often gets patients coming in presenting with complications. They're already on treatment. They have a prognosis. And he says, man, no one's told them that they're dying. No one's told them they're going to die. I mean, we all know we're going to die, but no one's told them they're going to die of this disease quite soon. And so they present thinking, what's wrong with me? And he's like, well, you're dying. And I said, are you serious that people that haven't told them, that their doctors, their oncologists have not told them they're dying? And he says, yeah, I'm sometimes the first person to tell them they're going to die. I mean, is that like a rare sort of thing? Or?
No, that's not rare at all, and that's the sad thing. And often it's not even a member of the healthcare team who initiates the question. Often it's a patient who says to one of the team, am I dying? And when someone asks you that question, I have always firmly believed that is the point where you show whether you've got balls or not. Because it takes a lot of guts to go, well, you know what? I think you might be. And there's all this stuff in the mainstream environment around role delineation. Okay, so what's a doctor's job, what's a nurse's job, what's a social worker's job, blah, blah. I've always worked, and it's got me into trouble on occasion, I can tell you.
Oh, we all get into trouble, don't worry.
But I don't care.
You push the envelope. I mean, those of us who care, I mean. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I always figure if a person says to me, Molly, am I dying? They've asked me because they've been watching. They've watched, they've said, well, I asked that person, I need to ask that person. They've chosen the moment to ask. And by asking me that question, that is a really big test. Because technically, and I don't know why this is, but technically it's only a doctor who is allowed to say yes to that question. Which is crap, because if we were working as a healthcare team, we're all equal members. But anyway, I've always worked on the theory that if the person has asked me, they have asked me for a reason. And I'm not going to betray that trust by A, telling them a lie, or B, saying, just hold that thought, I'll go find your doctor. Because if you do that, exactly, you've lost the opportunity won't come again. Because they take that as, I shouldn't have asked that question, I shouldn't have asked her that, I shouldn't ask anyone that, I need to keep that to myself. The person dies without ever being able to have conversations about what that means for them with the people who matter to them. And like I say, it has got me in trouble. It's got me in trouble with medical staff who haven't been particularly enlightened. And it's got me into trouble with families who've said, who said you could tell mum she was dying? She's going to drop her bundle now and she'll die a whole lot quicker. And when you sit them down and say, okay, so what makes you think that by me responding to your mum's question that she's going to die quicker? Well, she'll give up because she's got, she's got nothing, she's got no hope. You've taken away her hope. And my response always is to that, okay, so is it better that she has unrealistic hope that tells her that she's not going to die and so she doesn't talk about the stuff that matters to her? Or is it better that she has realistic hope and she's able to do and say what she needs to do in the time she's got left? So we deal with the dying bit so she can actually get on with living, because that's what she's doing until her heart stops beating and her lungs stop breathing. Like, she's living right now. So how can we help her live in the way she wants to live for however long she's got left?
So I gather this is the main problem with the way we do death and dying, Molly, is that we're not actually letting that happen. We're not actually asking people, how do you want to live with the time you've got left? How do you want to die? And what do you want to happen after? The conversations we're not having.
We're not having the conversations there. And I think, it's like throwing a rock into a pond, Ben, it's the ripple thing. So the immediate ripple is that we're not doing death and dying well, particularly in acute health and aged care. The ripples beyond that is that we're not doing it well in our families or as individuals. But beyond that further is that we're not doing it well as communities. So in modern Western culture, we have this death-denying attitude where, 100 years ago, people would talk about this stuff like how they talked about the harvest or whatever it was, because death was normal. It happened in everybody's neighbourhoods. And when it happened, people pulled together, they supported the family, one person would make meals, one person would pick kids up from school, one person would, do the shopping, whatever,
it wasn't
to support the family. No.
Yeah, or
but
hygienic
now,
or commercialised or institutionalised or whatever isation you can come up with.
Exactly.
It was more hands-on and real.
And we supported grieving people, not just the day that someone died, because we knew they were grieving. They wore black. There was a black ribbon on their door. Old men by the side of the road would take their hat off when a hearse came past. All that stuff.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore, do we?
No.
We just look away.
Well, do you know what else? Most funeral directors don't have more than one hearse. Did you know that deceased people are transported all over the major cities in the back of white vans that have stick-on magnetic things that go on the side for different normal companies? So for instance, funeral directors that 20 years ago would have had 15 or 20 hearses now have 2 or 3.
Wow.
And all they do is show up at the church or at the funeral parlour. That's it.
I did not know that.
There's a whole lot of stuff about funerals and burial, and it is.
This is a death conspiracy.
It is.
Death-denying conspiracy.
It's scary.
Tony Abbott coined that term, the death cult, in talking about jihadists. We have the death-denying cult.
We do.
Now, look, you've published you've written some books that are published.
Yeah.
What are the names of your books?
So I wrote my first book in 2005 for young children about death, and it's called Jellybean's Secret. So it's a novella, and it tells the story of a grandma who lives with a young family who has a stroke, and then she doesn't recover. So she's dying in hospital, and it tells the story of her granddaughter, Abby, who's 8, and her brother, Zach, who's 12, and the mum and dad, and how they deal with the whole thing of her deterioration and her death, and how they remember her after she's died. So, and this is the other part of the puzzle, Ben, right? We're not doing the death and dying thing very well, but we're certainly not doing ritual and memorialisation well either.
I'm a big fan of ritual. I think it's highly significant, and it comes down to the intention that you put in, the meaning you put into everything you're doing.
Absolutely.
A ritual, really, a ceremony, everything's representing something. It's highly symbolic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Indigenous peoples do this really well.
They do.
We used to do this really well. I'm an Anglo-Saxon Celtic background. We used to do it really well with our druidry and shamanism and goodness what. But it's just the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I know.
It's all this just sterility now, isn't it? It's post-modern stuff going on. So
Jellybean's Secret.
Jellybean's Secret, yep.
And the second one was published by Allen and Unwin in about 2011, I think.
Okay.
Called Sometimes Life Sucks. The target audience for that is sort of young adult group. So anyone from about 12 to about 50 fits in that group. And that's stories too, but it's based on the documented, researched risks of complicated bereavement. So every story is a story around one of those bereavement risks. For instance, death of a child is one of the stories. So it tells a story that then it unpicks the story a little bit and talks about, you know, what are some of the things you can do to help in that situation, or if you're feeling these things, it's actually okay, you know, that sort of stuff. So there's everything from a chapter on suicide, including a story, all the way through to a chapter on perceived centrality, which is when you actually holistically grieve the death of someone you've never met. And I really get this because I've had a huge attack of perceived centrality. Me too.
David Bowie,
yes,
that's why you played under
totally,
pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, honestly, when I found that David Bowie died, I was so upset and I had a double gin.
Well, you know, I couldn't even post anything for a week.
Yeah.
I really needed to step back and take some time and think about it, because he'd always been a very high profile figure in my life as a young person.
Yeah.
I went to every concert he'd done when he was out here.
You were a fan?
I felt like I was more than a fan. I felt like he got me when no one else did.
He had that wonderful appeal, didn't he?
Yeah.
You felt you could connect. I mean, I have the same thing. I felt that I could connect to Bowie, that, you know, he wouldn't judge me. You often feel that certain bands are pretty, I don't know, judgmental, like, oh, I don't know if you're going to fit in with our genre.
Yeah.
I don't think you had that with Bowie at all.
No. And that whole, like, I've always been very arty, you know, and that whole reinvention, creativity, evolution element of his life, I felt my life has really mirrored. And then he gave me the biggest gift of all, and that's why I used him in my presentation, because in order for him to die at home, surrounded by family, to be removed from the house, to be cremated and have his ashes scattered, he had to have had conversations with his family, he had to have had a plan in place, and he had to have done it in a way that nobody knew. So you can't organise that stuff, especially when you're a bloody music icon,
so
unless you talked about it with the people you love.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, that's the final gift. And
especially apropos your field.
Absolutely.
And interest.
It couldn't have been like he's given me.
And his album, his last album,
I know,
was all about the existential dilemma, distress, exploration of it musically, artistically, creatively. What better way to deal with a scary topic, or as, so to speak, scary topic? So is that what we need to do then, Molly? We need to what? We need to be creative around it. We need to talk about it. We need to, because I know if you call yourself the death talker and not the death whisperer, horse whisperer.
Yeah. No, we don't need to whisper. We've done enough whispering.
We need conversations.
Yes.
We need to be upfront. We need to be assertive. Is that right?
And we need to have some guts.
Yeah.
You know, we need to stand up there and go, this isn't good enough anymore. You know, and I tell you what, when I'm dying, we're going to be talking about it, because I don't want my kids living with guilt that they didn't get to say stuff to me that they wanted to say because other well-meaning people were saying, oh, no, you can't go saying that. You know, I don't want that. I don't want my grandkids to be scared about dying. And in fact, I can tell you, my little 5-year-old granddaughter knows exactly what dying is, because that's what the sunflowers do every season. They grow, they bloom when Father Christmas comes, then all their juice gets sucked out and they shrivel up, and that's when we harvest their seeds, once they've died, because out of every death comes renewal. And that's what she told me about 3 weeks ago, and she's 5. Out of every death, Molly, comes renewal. And I said, is that so, Sonny? She goes, that's exactly right.
Wow.
So, you know, little people do get it. They do understand it if you're open and honest and upfront with them. You
know, in the old days, going back not to the old days you were referencing with the respect and everything, I mean, I had the privilege of witnessing and being a part of a Greek Orthodox funeral in my family. I think I was talking to you about before. And the way the Greek Orthodox, because my father-in-law, who's English, was living in Greece when he died, and we nursed him at the last days of his life. So witnessing that is just mind-blowing. It begs a lot of questions about what life is, what death is, etc. But the way they do death is so in your face. I mean, the open casket on the 2 chairs facing each other in front of the fireplace. Well, not too close to the fireplace.
Yeah.
Not in winter anyway. And, you know, I'm sitting there cooking pasta with some music on, having a glass of wine or something, and there's this corpse with the laurel around him, and for 2 days. And we kept prayer vigil all day and all night. After the women came and washed his body with white wine and wrapped him up. And then, you know, people coming, keeping vigil, and then taking the body to the Orthodox chapel, and the priest being a total part of the community, and all those roles you were talking about. People, you know, making the food, looking after the kids. People coming in from the olive fields because it was harvest season. He died just after the solstice in winter. And these people coming in and getting the dust off there and coming in to pay their respects. You know, it was actually beautiful and incredibly moving. And everyone came up to us and greeted us and said something in Greek. And I said something like, I think I was supposed to say Hambros, which means son-in-law. And I said Lambros, which means I'm a being of light.
Nice.
Who knows, that might have been rather prophetic. Who knows? But you're definitely a Lambros.
Thank you.
In this field. And you have another book coming out as well.
Yeah,
soon.
it's that book is
just to sort of wrap this up.
To be named.
To be named. Okay, so look out.
Currently has a working title, but it's a book that's going to be an everyman's guide to living and dying. Really, that's its working title. So it will debunk all of the jargon, all of the, you know, the euphemisms, all of that. So any ordinary person in the street can pick it up off a shelf and find out what they need to know about living, dying, after death care, funeral options, burial, that sort of stuff, how to start conversations in your family, how to write an advanced care plan, you know, that sort of simple stuff that if people just knew how to do it, they go, cool, easy.
That sounds wonderful, and a one-stop shop, and we need that information desperately because we're all avoiding it, we're all in denial. Well, a lot of us are, in the West especially. And, you know, I just think that it's going to happen to all of us. And I, you know, as a psychologist, Molly, I really do think that at the heart of most anxiety disorders and even depression, to some degree, there's a heterogeneous disorder, of course, is really at the end of it, it's death anxiety. It's the fact that I'm going to die and I don't know what to do about that. I'm in denial. I have to sort of put up walls. If we did have these conversations about death, I'm actually wondering how that would impact people's psyches, you know, and mental health. If people were far more open about death and dying, would we be happier?
Do you know, that's a really interesting question, Ben, because, like, I can't quote you any numbers, but anecdotally, over the 30 plus years I've been working in this area, I can't tell you the number of people who have said to me, at the point of which we've had this conversation, even though they're living with a terminal diagnosis, you have no idea how liberated I feel. Because now I can get on with the stuff I want to do. It's like we've had that conversation, I know everything's sorted and everything's going to happen how I want it to happen. Now, let me get on with the living I've got left to do, you know? So until...
Rather than sort of this foreboding...
Yeah, it's like people that feel constrained until... It's sort of like Houdini a bit, I guess. It's like people feel like they're chained up and they're upside down in the big glass tank until someone throws them the key that enables them to unlock the cuffs and free themselves, and all of a sudden they realise they have all this opportunity. You know? They're only limited by their own imagination.
I'm a lover of metaphor, and that was exquisite.
Oh, thanks. I do pride myself on my capacity.
I'm in the tank with you. Okay, well, look, thank you so much, Molly Carlile.
My pleasure.
For coming on Waking Man. And hopefully this is a point of departure for bigger and better things, especially open conversations about death and dying, because it's going to happen to all of us. And I would suggest, preparedness never goes astray. I mean, it's good to be prepared, and then not to worry so much about something that you can't even stop.
Yeah.
I know Walt Disney's head is still frozen cryogenically, right?
Yeah.
And other such people. Okay, whatevs, totes whatevs, man. But good luck. But yeah, it's going to happen to all of us. It's good to be open to it. So look, thank you so much, Molly, and for all your work. So this is Ben Bruce from Waking Mad signing off with Molly Carlile, the Death Talker, Order of Australia, and thank you for watching Waking Mad.
Can I just say too, Ben,
Yes.
people can catch me on my website, deathtalker.com, or on my Facebook page, The Death Talker, and there's videos on there, there's resources they can access, or flip me an email, whatever. Glad to talk to people, any old time.
And please remember to like, share, subscribe, Waking Mad channel. We'll be back. Thank you.